Thank you for tuning into The Truth with Trinity, and I am your host, Trinity. And if this is your first time tuning into the podcast, I'd like to send you a warm welcome. Here I talk about issues that happen within the black community, hopefully for some resolution or at least some food for thought to go about your daily way. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce this episode's topic, which is why the modern black woman must be everything her enslaved female ancestors couldn't be. Okay, so I'm going to make a small disclaimer. This does not apply to every black person in this country. I'm talking about America, and this does not apply to every white person in this country in America. But things need to be discussed, and if they are never discussed on a raw and uncut basis, then I don't think that neither black or white people, period, going to be able to move forward, even if it was ever possible to begin with. So I want to start off by saying that when we talk about the modern black woman and why she has to be everything that her enslaved female ancestors couldn't be. So before we go into that, I like to say that I believe that the average black person, okay, so regardless of gender, both black men and black women have been told that history that pertains to black people more than usually about 60 plus years ago is often frequently referred to or regarded to as old, irrelevant, repetitive. Okay, so this is something I think that a lot of black people can bear witness to, that they're told if it, even if there's something good or bad in relation to black people, inventions, struggles, or whatever, it's always, told to them really that it's old, irrelevant, and repetitive. Meanwhile, many other races, and one in particular, they make movies, holidays. So, excuse me, they make movies, holidays, okay, after their particular cultures and things of that nature, literature, commercials, etc., about their history, 100, 500, even 2,000 and beyond years ago. And their American curriculum ensures, everyone's kids. So not only are they proud of their own history, and we're talking about, white people, Europeans, they're very proud of it. Not only are they proud of it, but they, if your children go to American schools, you're going to know how proud they are about, their viewpoint on history, okay? But like I said, in contrast, black people are really told and, shied away from talking about anything that, relates to their history past a certain years back, okay? But why? Every time the average black person expresses pride or even stress on, positive things or negative things about the history of black people, okay, black people are generally told to stop dwelling mentally, okay? So stop dwelling in the past. This is just an automatic, no matter what it is, okay? But why though? Okay, and we usually hear this, we can hear it from all sorts of races of people, but we generally hear it, from white people. And like I said, I know the topic is one thing, but to really draw out, what's going on with black women and black people in general, I mean, white people hate to admit it, but because, blacks were in the back of their yard, camping out and sleeping, the histories are intertwined no matter what. And it's like a light and day reality of what was happening back then. But to go back to what I was saying though, black people are generally told, don't dwell in the past. Meanwhile, a lot of white people have told black people that. Meanwhile, white people make medieval movies, Viking movies, literature, so the whole bit, and they have holidays and everything, but a lot of times they're quick to tell, especially namely black people, like anytime we mention it, that they either deny that the person is black, or well, that's not a black person that invented that, or they're not really black. So there's always some type of you know, um, you know, unvalidation, or the word I'm basically getting at. It's like there's some type of rejection of reality. Okay, so it's either or, and but it is because when black people mention their history, okay, so but why? Okay, so why is it always either denied our history, or it's told, basically discouraged to talk about? But why? It is because when black people mention their history, so when we as black people mention our history, okay, um it either is a time in reference where black men ruled the earth, okay, Or if you fast forward to black people being captured and enslaved, now lost in an endless wilderness. Okay, so that's one reason I think that some white people may have a hard time listening to black people, because black people, we can either say, hey, we were once kings and queens, our ancestors, a lot of the things that they claim, are European, are black. So it's hard for them to hear us say, hey, Cleopatra was black, Egyptian was black. It's hard for them, a lot of them, to hear us say that, because they've been saying that, Cleopatra and King Tut is white. When you see a lot of the, the made up statues and stuff that you see now in European, resemblance. Okay, so, and they've been telling their children that this has been going on for centuries. With black people. Okay, so it's either we as black people, when we talk about our history, we talk about that point, or we talk about what our ancestors, that came over here, or were already over here, or got captured, or basically whatever they were doing over here in America, once white people had settled and decided that black people were going to be slaves. Okay, so that's another reason why a lot of white people don't want to hear about it, because while they were having a great time, fantastic time, black people were having a horrific time. So, therefore, in particular, most white people from America hate hearing about the early American history, okay, told by a black person's point of view, because although the 1600s through the 1900s was a time where most white men had successfully exterminated the Native Americans. According to them, this was new land, okay, cotton picking businesses, and, new money and treaties and parties and social classes that they had built, and endless money, $100,000 back in the, $100,000 back in, the 1600s, when, things in cotton picking was very much picking up, and a lot of black people had started to be over here, so many more slaves, they had endless money. $100,000 was like a millionaire back then. So new constitutions were written, for the class, and, children of, Caucasians in America, and own laws is a very stark, so their own laws and everything that, had came in about with white people. And so that was a very great time for them, is what I'm getting at. The parties, the punch balls, having people wash them up, fan them while they were asleep, breastfeed their children. And I think I always mention this, but I think it bothers me when I hear, sometimes when I hear white people say, black people are lazy on welfare, and there's just like no reason out of the blue so many black people are poor. There's always that percentage that can do for self, but then there's also like, where this welfare, start at. Of course it started, with helping white women out from domestic violence situations that black people couldn't even get on welfare. And then I think there's a statistic where there's more white people on welfare than black people, but yet we're stereotyped for it. But besides that, though, when we look at slavery, white people couldn't even dress themselves. When they talk about black people not being able to work, I mean, like, you didn't pick your own cotton, you didn't come up with most of your own inventions. They came from, tribes of blacks that were your slaves, so you could take their information and use it as your own and become rich off of it. So these things are not discussed, about black people and, with white people, especially back in those times. Okay, so this was a great time for white people. Okay, like I said, all the parties and everything in these big houses. But on the stark contrast side, from a black slave, okay, who lived during these same times. Okay, so I think right here is not that white people, a lot of times they don't want to talk about the 1600s or the 1800s. So like I said, they make plays, they're pretty proud of those times, and the pioneer times, for their time. But when we start talking about our history as blacks, though, okay, that lived during these times, the same times that they're happy about. But on the reverse side, the serving, the branding and burning of our skin like horses, that when you belong to a certain plantation, you had to get branded like cows do, but they did black people like that. The 8 and 10-year-old slave girls pregnant and raped. Okay, black men forced to cry through genital mutilation, burnings, hangings, torn featherings, and whipped till he cried like a baby due to the pain of 1,000 lashes, okay, at bullwhips, where black men were made to cower in front of black women. Okay, so this is, part of this thing where, the black man has, been reduced to that. But, like I said, even when I'm talking about black women right now, it's time for, I think, black women, and it's time for also black men to do something different than what's been hand scripted to them, to be able to step out of this ditch, mental ditch that we're in as black people as a whole, where we just can't seem to form anything based off of our dysfunction, okay? And it is because of the truth of this information, while whites only want to remember what was their grandest years, were black people's most horrific, okay? So I think basically what I'm saying is, I think a lot of times, when black people say that a lot of white people are not ready to discuss race, especially in history, because, like I said, for a lot of white people that lived during those times, and the things that even, white people and black people were taught by their grandparents, and I'm sure some white people have books and films and certain things, from back in those times, that, like I said, that was a great time for white people, but it was very horrific for black people, and because of that, and it happened during the same year. So I think a lot of times, I think what we're shown as black people is that it's okay for white people to talk about the 1600s and the Boston Tea Party, and the things that were happening back in the 1800s. The Patriots won against the British coming, and they fake discovered what they discovered, and everything's great. And there's nothing against, I'm not perpetuating hate. I'm just saying, as far as a black person's viewpoint on how they feel. And I think when I'm drawing into about black women, about black people, breaking these cycles, is that we just got to move forward, pretty much. Okay, so therefore, okay, they don't want to think or care of their reasoning behind always discouraging black people to talk or even be proud of any history. Okay. And that's why I was saying, at one point, when they're talking about history, it's all grand and there's a campfire. But when black people, we start to talk about history during the 16 and 1800s, it's not that same gay old party, at the country club that it was on the opposite side of being on the plantation side. So then it becomes, oh, don't dwell on history. Other than that, it's a pretty proud thing that a lot of people like to, I think, talk about their history, even other ethnicities of people, and black people, I think, in that aspect are encouraged not to tell their children about their history as well. And because the newer generation, okay, has bought into this idea that dismissing their own heritage and history is perfectly okay if it comforts someone else, okay? So that's why I was saying, a lot of our the newer generations, they're being discouraged. They've already been discouraged, and so they feel to tell other black kids or other black people. So this is black people telling other black people, I think, because of the mass conditioning, to just say, hey, we're not going to talk about our own race. So not only, I think, black people have been discouraged to feel uncomfortable with talking about their race or even being proud about their culture because of the situations that are intertwined with other people involved, and discouraged not to talk about it. I think parents over the years have taught their children not to discuss it. And so now black children or black young adults are even discouraging other black adults from talking or being proud of anything that may be black. Okay. Also, and because I've always said that discussing black people as always picking cotton in U.S. history books and the same three leaders described, because they're always talking about, pretty much, I mean, there's nothing insignificant about these people, like people like Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, the back of the bus, and then the Freedom March, and then Harriet Tubman freeing people to slaves. And, in a lot of the U.S. history books, there's this small black portion, but it's very compartmentalized to just the three main stories that you always hear, K through 12. And then it's just that, talking about slavery, so this is like what is supposed to be said about black people, and that's it. Almost as if black people are reduced to just slavery. And the four black people that are always discussed, like I said, every year you always hear about, you never hear about anybody new. I mean, you hear about hundreds of, patriots, but you don't hear a lot about, it's always those 3 or 4 black people in that 15-page chapter, in school every year in, American schools. But that, and that's why I was saying to black parents, Black parents must learn past and present black history to teach and reteach black children, okay? And for us as black people to continually refuse and reject the opportunities our black ancestors died for a fraction of a price, that, you know, let me rephrase that. That's pretty messed up for us as black people. A lot of the, opportunities that, our ancestors has tried to escape plantations to be free, wanted to learn how to read and got sold to another plantation. Just everything that we went through, being killed for even looking a white person in the eye at one time, and things of this nature, they just wanted our ancestors basically just wanted a fraction of the freedom that we have now. And that's why it's important for us to know our history, not just to plan for the future, live in the present, but also know about the past, because we can and must do better, okay, by remembering their history, okay, their triumphs and their failures, as our ancestors, lived. Because if you don't know who or the why, you can be led down the same path again, okay? So this is going all the way back into why the modern black woman must be everything her enslaved female ancestors couldn't be. Okay, as black women, because of the unspoken frequent trauma of rape, domestic violence, physical, psychological, emotional, and spiritual abuse, um, that spiritual abuse that basically deals with the soul, these are things that the black woman has went through time and is currently still going through. The black woman, okay, on average has been taught to use the very same areas that cause her pain, her initial cause of her pain. So let me kind of go back into that. I think black women, we're taught to, keep having sex, keep doing this, and keep doing, I think, a lot of things that has caused us pain. Okay, so when we talk about the domestic violence at the hands of a lot of black men, a lot of our men, because of their things that they're refusing to do, that they need to do as men. So we are, as black women, I think, too, we're suffering the domestic violence and stuff, and I think, and the rape too, and I think those issues right there is what causes a lot of black people to need, a lot of black women to need to take a step back. So, just because you get hurt in a relationship, for an example, it's not time to just hop in another relationship. It's time to, maybe stop emphasizing areas that may have caused pain until we can become healed. Like, for example, the history of our ancestors being beaten, forced to have plantation owners, the plantation owners' sons, the plantation owners' neighbors, the plantation male relatives' babies, while having black men's babies at the same time. And, I know a lot of people, like to play us as black people. I think, when you talk about white psychology, they can get into a car wreck and all of a sudden they've got a diagnosis for it. And in a court of law, they can say about how something has caused one of their white clients significant mental damage just off of a simple car wreck or PTSD off of it. But when it comes to black people and just the generations of being bred and born, and they know all about Scientology and DNA structures and behavior patterns and genetics, how we can't see how this has affected us as black women. I mean, think about that, being on our ancestors, having a husband, but your husband and your marriage really isn't legit because you're still the owners of slaves. Then, the black man having to deal with his black woman being raped by all sorts of men, her having babies, not only babies by the plantation owner, but men that she'll never meet again that probably just passed by, another white colleague or something, and she doesn't even realize who she's pregnant by because it's probably like 20 different white men in a month. So she's having all sorts of men's babies, plus the plantation owner's babies, plus her black slave husband's babies as well. And the black man having to psychologically deal with that, where any man, regardless of race, would be infuriated, of any man tampering with their wife, and mixing DNA and having to, be subjugated to that, what damage psychologically that has done to black men and black women. Okay, but what I'm saying is, in regards to my topic at hand, is okay. Meanwhile, the black man, like I said, was suppressed, and as black women, we must not only, okay, um, we not only, excuse me, we not only owe it to ourselves, our children, but our female black ancestors, okay, who didn't have the chance of sharing herself intimately with only one man. Think about, that's one of the things, like I said, that our ancestors, they would have wished they had, but we as black people, and I'm talking about black women right now, we just throw that ability away. One man to father her kids living in freedom. Our black ancestors that dealt with slavery wish they could have just had children and been intimately involved with just their own husband without having to be forced to be with hundreds of other men, okay? With her kids. We owe it to ourselves, okay? To refrain from continually dishing out sex even when we are in pain or unhealed, because I'm sure that's a lot of stuff that our ancestors had to do, no matter how they felt or how sick they were, how tired they were from picking cotton for 20 hours straight, no matter if they just had a baby or if they just got whipped, they had to perform sexually for however many men. Hopefully they survived it, you know. Hopefully they survived it, and still was having to carry on the next day with picking cotton and everything else that went around the dangers of living the plantation life. Okay, the black woman in 2021, okay, deserves marriage before children. I'll repeat that again. The black woman in the year 2021 going into 2022 deserves marriage before children. Yes, you, black woman, if you're listening right now, especially if you don't already have children or thinking about children, the black woman needs to condition her mind to think about being that lucky wife versus that downtrodden, struggling baby mama. Okay? Let us abolish the term of baby mama and create a new legacy where our children are creating holistic families that will produce holistic children. So, you notice I said, our children leaving legacies, okay? So, even if, things didn't work out great for us, black woman, and we are left, to carry on that, 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 um, that unfortunate situation of being a child's mother, that's where we as black people need to mature to understand that, hey, if I made a mistake as a man or a woman, I can teach my child better so I can produce better black people for the future that can have families and think this way and also create more holistic black children. Also, number two, I'd like to discuss is us as black women through history. Many black women were conditioned through physical and medical torture to be referenced to as a masculine female. This ideology came from racist founding fathers. This was all to justify their evil need for an explanation as to how black women could clean, be raped by many men per night, still recover, and still had her spiritual faith. Okay, so this was astounding to the white man, and white people. Like, how could black women still survive something their women would have like died from hemorrhaging and just all the things that happened to black women during those times. And like I said, I think with the people and the white psychologists that did come up with saying that black women were men because black women are built different. Okay, so black women have a different muscle mass. They don't want to tell the truth that this is because black women are the original form of human beings that first existed, and so are black men. So our muscular structure, and then they like to torture black people, say black people are not in pain because of these differences, out of hatred for those differences that black people have. Also, the explanation of the black woman's strength had to be because she was either part male or because she was part animal, according to the first American doctors. But it is because, unlike histories of many European and French queens that were discouraged to rule solo, black women like Cleopatra and others before her ruled entire empires. Therefore, like many old things, that white people claim they discovered. This is one of those things, they claim they discovered, like, oh, this is so, weird that black women are so strong through all of this torture. We're just going to say to justify our own rationale because I think, when we talk about, I think the European history, they've got some great things about it, just like any race, but, they don't want to admit the shortcomings. And I think one thing that can sort of bite, white people in the butt, not all, but a lot of them, is that they have to have a title and a name for everything. So even with looking at the black woman when she first came over here, and so through all the torture that, white women and men had put black women through, just how she was still so resilient and able to cook and able to carry on and able to still take care of all her kids by different men. I think, white people had to have a term for it, and we're going to just say she's not magnificent because she's a Negro, so she can't be magnificent, but she's got to be more than a woman, so she's got to be a man. And I think that's part of I think where black women in itself has to break free from. Okay, and I can only imagine. Okay, and yet too, as a black woman, I've witnessed and I've experienced some times, okay, and so this is not all white women, okay, but I want to be honest and candid here, especially I like to talk about this because, we have a lot of, not all, but a lot of white women, they're adopting the urban culture, a lot more women are with black men, and, there's nothing wrong with that, interracial relationships, but I'm making a point here. So now we're hearing a lot of white women saying that black women are upset, some of them, not all black women, but I've heard some white women voice their complaints about black women upset that they feel like, black women are upset at white women for trying to adopt black culture. So, like maybe wearing eyelashes or something like that, that a lot of urban black women may do. I personally, hey, everyone, this is a quote unquote free country, but I'm diving in at a point here, okay? So you hear a lot of white women now complaining that black women are saying that this is a black woman's predominant style. Why are you trying to act or wear this, okay? But I want to talk to white women as well right now. And a lot of, not all white women, but as they did in the past, start yelling and becoming semi-violent at a black woman for trying to be feminine, intelligent, and ladylike because it was the white woman's way of saying you aren't allowed to act like a lady because only white women can, okay? So you saw this more back then. And like I said, I can only imagine about trying to wear something very pretty other than a sackcloth back in slavery times because, a white woman, if you were dressed something similar to what she would wear, she would say, how dare you try to wear something I would wear? You're just a dark Negro. And I think, a lot of white people could say, hey, that's the past. That's, that's 500 years ago. That's 490 years ago. But then we have not all white people, but there's, quite a bit more white people than I think white people would care to admit that want to keep that ideology. They teach their children this, and it's like, well, no, you can't control what anybody thinks, but when it starts to try to control and damage other people's lives off of your ideology, and then they say, well, deal with it. And then it's like, but they don't want other races of people to treat them like that. So to get back on focus, though, I highly encourage the black woman to put down all devices, music, movies, and literature that tells you that you are anything other than beautiful, okay? Now, if you need to work on yourself, and I'm talking about the inner beauty of black women, there's nothing wrong with self-improvement, as we all need to, right? But I want to tell you that if it's something telling you that you're not measuring up to a standard. And another thing about American beauty, I mean, we all pretty much know the founding fathers, these are all, European men, so European women and standards of beauty. I mean, black women, I think the first thing they need to understand is that, you shouldn't try to be something that you're not. And why want to be something other than who you are once you know the true knowledge of who you are as a black woman? I mean, you pretty much wouldn't want to be anyone else, and you would perfect the beauty that you have on the inside instead of so much more on the outside. Especially talking about us as black women, once we really truly understand our true value of beauty. And don't let racism or someone's old time rituals in regards to black women, like this know your place type of slave plantation owner mentality, or a person that holds these or harboring these type of issues toward black people, don't let it keep you from being the feminine black woman you were created to be. Okay, and you don't let anything stop that. Um, and as independent as we may think, okay, so as independent as we may think that we are as black women, okay, the bad bee persona, the baby mama lifestyle, the unclothed, the unmarried, multiple uh, children's fathers stigma was solely placed to keep the black woman stuck in a traumatized state, all while birthing traumatized black children. Okay, so even, with everything that black women have went through, right? Because a lot of these situations that have gave birth to these titles that black women love to call themselves, bossy, bad, like I said, whatever, all of it has usually origins from something of trauma for a black woman, something, a negative experience with a man, something, baby mama, something is not, great about what happened stemming from these titles. And so we're taught to basically recycle our trauma as black women, and so it can keep us stuck, and then it keeps our children stuck as well. Also, bottom line is, we as black women, okay, can no longer let anyone or situations, circumstances, rape, or trauma, physical abuse, assault, ever stop us from practicing our femininity. And I think that's something that's very deep for us as black women to understand. It's not about hating anybody. It's not about hating a particular race. It's not about, hating black men or even white men for that matter. But what I'm saying is we have to know who we are, where we come from. And I'm saying that, the situations such as the trauma, the domestic violence, especially rape, is number one in stripping away a woman's femininity. That's regardless of race. If any race of woman as a whole or majority of them start being raped as kids and growing up and all of them have the same story, there's going to be a lot of mentally damaged women for that demographic of man to choose from. So it is with black women. The quickest way to take and strip the woman, and we're talking about black women's femininity, is through rape. Okay? And the thing is, as black women, a lot of black women have that story. Okay? And what I'm saying is, it's your job as a woman to make sure that no one strips that away from you no matter what. So no matter what the external influence is, I encourage black women never to let someone make you feel harder than being your true self. And because those situations, as described before, as I just mentioned, are designed to strip the black woman of her femininity, this is the very same exact reason why black women must fight hard to either discover, develop, or maintain her dignity, which is also linked to a woman's femininity. Once the black woman regains a healthy balance of femininity, then she can break the age old curse of having to reveal everything just to be seen. Okay? Furthermore, I don't think most black people dwell on history as as others have often accused black people. Or at least black people don't relish on their history, no more than white people linger on their own version of history as Europeans. So I don't think, we as black people, what I'm saying is I don't think we discuss our race more than or less than anybody else does. Okay? It's just a different version. Than, Europeans may have. Lastly, black people must recognize, not only the present and future, but also the past. For with us, okay, having knowledge of our past prevents us from continuing to do things in the present that our ancestors would have hated. That pretty much concludes this segment. Let me know what you think down in the comment section. Where do we as black people, we need to basically, we owe it to our ancestors to present a better image of black women. Okay. Are things that we're doing, is this hand scripted for us? Something we think that we're independent at doing and creating? Are these baby mama roles and all these roles hand scripted for black women to act like? I mean, There's a lot that can be said that is hand scripted for black men, okay, where we're against each other as black people. But let me know what you think down in the comment section if you're listening on YouTube. Also, if you have any questions or suggestions, you can contact me at thetruthwithtrinity.com. You can also listen to my podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Anchor. And always remember, if you can't tell the truth with anyone else, you can with Trinity. Till next time, take care.